Yes, hello. Jamba. Yes, nice to see you all in person now. Both my students here of the MA program in international security. Maybe the hall is too large, but I'm just hesitant to say whether 100% is present or not. German will produce me the list in a couple of minutes of present and absent, and there is nothing in between. And I definitely welcome our African friends. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being with us. My apologies that I could not welcome you in the previous 2 days of your program in person. I was in the heart of Eurasia, and very hospitable city of Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan. But I'm back, and you don't need to see me on the video now, because with you here and will be with you most of the rest of the time of our program. Because I'm here not only to direct this program, but also to learn. We're all here to share and to learn. And one would not pretend, I would not pretend, I'm sure, other lecturers would not pretend that we are here those who know everything. Not at all. This would be completely wrong, I think. We would share what we would like to share, but we also would like you to share with us what you think is important, essential, of importance, and of concern. With that, let me stop my introductory general remarks for now. My lecture will be next one, so I will take the mic again very soon. But now it is my real pleasure to pass the mic and the floor to my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Dmitry Valerievich Polikanov, who you already met as the leadership of Rossotrudnichestvo, who brought you here. Actually, I'm speaking now, addressing our African guests. Dr. Polikanov is product of MGIMO. When he graduated from MGIMO with Swahili language as his first language, he started with the Russian-Swahili dictionary. Being still almost a student, or maybe just a very beginning in his professional career. So I'm sure he's well positioned to discuss things, at least with some of you. I know you're from different countries, and Swahili is applicable only to some of you, but he is well positioned to talk to you to some of you with the same language, literally speaking. Before taking this very distinguished post at Rossotrudnichestvo, Dr. Polikanov had a very distinguished and impressive career in international relations, unusually for the Russian tradition, where civil servant government officer starts in the government building and dies in the government building. Dr. Polikanov started with an NGO. Again, in some of your countries that may be norm, in some of your countries that may be not a norm. In Russia, this is unusual. He started at an NGO, at my NGO, at Peer Center, and worked brilliantly, including positions of deputy director and vice president of Peer Center, dealing with a variety of issues, including issues related to small arms and light weapons, including issues involving larger weapons, including development of the organization. Further on, he continued with leading an NGO which well, he may tell you more, which is called Соединение, which cares about children and others who have some health problems, some health challenges. With that experience, he wrote a book on the role of NGOs, non-governmental sector, in Russia, which is now a handbook for many of us here. He was with the Red Cross at some point, with the International Red Cross, and last but not least, joined the government at this position as deputy head of Rossotrudnichestvo. And I know that in addition to many passions Dmitry has, he's an author, he playwright, an actor. His last performance, drama performance, was last night at a drama theater. Very impressive. He also has passion for Africa, and with many opportunities to go to many places, he more and more chooses Africa for his business trips and for a leisure. With that, I stop. Dr. Polikanov, Dmitry, floor is yours, podium is yours.
Thank you very much. Nice to see familiar faces from this morning. So after such a kind of wonderful introduction, I have to suit all these merits, and to give you a nice lecture. Hopefully I will not disappoint you with my talk, and I'm sure that we'll have a lot of time to ask, to discuss something and to answer your questions. I really love Africa, and I think when I was in Namibia, I brought a T-shirt which says that Africa is not a place to visit, it's home. And for me, to a certain extent, this is a very right phrase, which demonstrates kind of correct attitude to the continent, which has prominent, I think, perspectives for the future. And I'm really glad that after a long while, Russia also starts to turn its face to the African continent and to understand the importance of the African continent for the 21st century. I really believe that Africa is the continent of the 21st century, not only because of the natural resources, not only because of the environmental potential, but also because of people. Because the only part of the world where you see demographic growth is Africa. And actually the people who will come, we all human beings millions of years ago, right, came out of Africa. So in the 21st century, definitely people who were born in Africa will move definitely to other parts of the world and will change the picture and change the landscape of many countries. I'm sure about that. Of course, for Russia, which pretends to be a great power and the country which is involved in resolving global problems, Africa is an important partner and a country where you can also implement a lot of interesting projects and take advantage of many opportunities. Definitely, one of the benefits, key benefits, is the lack of colonial history on the Russian side. And now, as you may notice in the Russian official rhetoric, we all the time emphasize that Russia is against neocolonialism, that Russia had no, unlike many other great powers, no history of conquests, colonial conquests, and things like that. We have historically good relations which are based on the cooperation in the sphere of education. Because in many African countries, the graduates from the Soviet universities, they are still there, they're in power, they take top positions, they still value the fact that they started in the Soviet Union, they had a chance to meet the Russian culture. Africans love Russian weapons. And it's not a secret. We do have a wonderful military-industrial complex, which makes a lot of smart and very advanced weapons, not very expensive at the same time, weapons that are tested in the real combat conditions, and therefore which are attractive to customers in many countries of the world, including Africa. But the important thing about Russian-African cooperation is that in most cases, again, if you look at the official rhetoric, rhetoric always addresses to the past. And that's the problem. Because if we want to develop something, we should address to the future. And that's why, for instance, Rossotrudnichestvo, the agency, the federal agency where I work as deputy head, so that's why we work with the youth. That's why we bring people from different countries within our New Generation program and some other projects to Russia in order to make connections, in order to make sure that you get some kind of skills and new experience which you can later use in your own countries to the benefit of your own countries. From this point of view, it's important, I think, to change this rhetoric, and this, I think, is true as well with regard to African leaders, to change this rhetoric and to think more about the future. Not always say, we were so good friends in the past. Fine, the past is over there. Wonderful. But we should move on. Otherwise, we'll see no progress. So, to my mind, there are several directions in which we can move, several areas where Russia can be really beneficial to the Wow, okay. For those who do not know my name, okay, now you can see it here. Where Russia can actually, help African countries in their development. So I have already said a few words about Russian weapons. And I think that from the point of arms supplies, I think we're still one of the best exporters in the world. And really, when Russians provide good conditions, good terms for this kind of contracts, and actually they are ready to invest in the security of different states, including countries that exist on the African continent. At the same time, you see that we have a new phenomenon in the last few years, the renaissance of mercenaries and private security companies. And again, here in Russia, we have people with combat experience who are ready to serve this role and who are ready to provide assistance in security issues for various governments across the African continent. And unlike French mercenaries or, I don't know, US mercenaries, the Russians are, I think, kind of much more fair in the approach and much more transparent. But if we talk about hard security, definitely we, in the next decades probably, we won't be that active in peacekeeping missions. There were times when there were a lot of Russian officers and Russian military and Russian policemen in peacekeeping missions across the world, especially in the 90s. Then I think the overall concept changed, and now Russia is very cautious about peacekeeping. So from this point of view, we can undertake diplomatic efforts to resolve the conflicts. We can, I don't know, provide some sort of humanitarian assistance, but definitely what you should not expect is that Russia will send its peacekeepers to countries across the globe. The second sector is cybersecurity and the IT sector, And again, here I think, first of all, it is rapidly developing in Russia. Secondly, we see the growing interest in different African countries towards the IT products which are being developed in our country. They are easily adaptable. They can be used both in B2G and B2C sector and B2B sector, etc., etc. And plus, thanks to sanctions, we can demonstrate to the rest of the world that cybersecurity is our kind of, well, top advantage, right? Because in the last 2 years, after all the attacks that were organized against Russian critical infrastructure in the cyberspace, we have developed sophisticated skills from the point of providing cybersecurity, tested in real life. So it's not just kind of, well, declarations. So from this point of view, I think that the technologies that we have, I don't know, from face recognition to artificial intelligence and various software, I don't know, even for the organization of elections, etc., etc. So it's all of good quality, and it all can help African countries in their development, right? Just I think yesterday or 2 days ago, there was a piece of news about Russian IT sector that actually we now hire the IT specialists from African countries because we lack our software developers in Russia and we need more. And we find these new workers in Zimbabwe, in Nigeria, I think in Kenya, and in some other parts of the African continent. So thanks to, well, the modern world, you can work, well, with a distant employment. Actually, this kind of cooperation is going on very quickly. The third sector is social sphere, and we can divide it into two sub-spheres, which is healthcare and education. Both Russia and Africa do not have enough money for healthcare, right? I mean, I'm sure that you know very well the real situation in your hospitals, and well, the same is in Russia. But at the same time, with this kind of modest budgets that the government provides for healthcare services, at the same time we have a lot of technologies and inventions on how to spend this money in the most efficient way. And from this point of view, we can be helpful to African countries which also don't have large budgets for healthcare, how to improve this system through this kind of management technologies, because a lot depends not only the actual equipment, which is sometimes available, but in human resources and in management, which is lacking, right? For instance, in Russia, I think more than 10 years ago, there was a large national project of modernization of healthcare. So what they did, as all governments do, they said, okay, we will buy a lot of new advanced equipment. They bought it, and what happened next? There were no specialists who could work on this equipment. So it was simply standing in the warehouses. It was not operational, or sometimes it was operational, but it was operational in a very slow mode because, I mean, people were simply learning how to use it, and the overall organizational structure, was not very optimal, and therefore people had to wait in long queues to get access to this equipment. Now, with the digitalization of Russian healthcare, we see that all these management processes are being optimized. And actually, we can share these solutions of how to use this equipment more efficiently, how to spend less time of the doctors and of the patients, and how to achieve the best possible result with the small amount of money. The same with education. In the area of education, we are very competitive in a number of spheres, right? So it can be, again, IT, it can be health, it can be engineering, it can be agriculture, and many other. We have nice universities with good professors, which are cheaper than Harvard or Stanford or Oxford, etc., which provide you with a very good diploma, and you can easily return to your country and start earning money. From this point of view, we as an agency are aimed at promoting Russian higher education, and the Russian government also provides for the system of quotas for fellowships for the foreign students. Every year, the Russian government pays for 30,000 foreign students who come to Russia to study. And this program applies not only kind of, bachelor level, but also master programs, postgraduate programs, skill advancement programs, etc., etc. So this program is available to a huge variety of young people across the world. For the African continent, out of this 30,000, it's only nearly 5,000 fellowships which are available, which is really small to my mind, taking into account our interest in Africa and our desire to develop relations. But hopefully this situation will change and the government will provide for more fellowships in the upcoming years, seeing the demand from the African continent. But beside the universities, we also have to think about secondary education, and I talked about this this morning, that secondary education is we all know that is the major driver for economic development. So the changes in secondary education give you the highest possible economic impact, and actually, people can change their life, and change their career options through good secondary education. We see the growing, demand on the African continent for Russian schools, or at least for the Russian system of education. And it's not only about Russian language. It's about mathematics, physics, and many other things that we know how to teach. I think that, again, one of the promising areas where we can really develop our relationship is the opening of this kind of Russian schools. So it doesn't mean that, again, all the subjects there should be studied in Russian. It can be bilingual school, no problem about that. And it can be a private school, which is simply supported by the government or partly sponsored by the government to do this kind of job. So that these schools become some sort of centers of promoting Russian culture, promoting Russian ways of learning the world. This can be very helpful, again, for the African countries, as well. Currently, our Ministry of Education has a plan to open up in different countries the so-called centers for extra education in Russian, and so they invest into the opening of these centers, but I hope that they will move on and will not limit themselves to opening of the centers, but also will think about supporting the existing initiatives of opening Russian schools. And again, here in Russia, we have a lot of organizations which are ready to do this kind of job. They simply have to be connected to the African countries. A good example, it's not from Africa, but from the Middle East, is the Primakov Gymnasium. So it is one of the best schools in the Moscow region, and it's a public-private partnership. So they have public seats there, but also if you are rich enough, you can actually buy a seat in this for a child in this school. What they did is they opened up their branch in the United Arab Emirates, and it was the initiative of the locals who said, we know that Russian education is good. We came to Moscow and we saw how this gymnasium operates. We like it. We would like to have it here in in Abu Dhabi. So what they did, they found the local investor, they got the Russian technologists, they made the cooperation agreement, the school is there, and they are thinking about opening another branch in Dubai, because it is on demand, because people are ready to send their children there to pay for that, and actually it's a wonderful, very profitable business project, which started again as some kind of, non-governmental initiative. So again, within this area of education, there is one more sector which is also underestimated. This is a sector of vocational training. Vocational training is what becomes very popular in Russia and in many parts of the world. In Africa especially, because when you are young, you want to get a job. And you want to not to study for 6 years to get this job, you want it now, or in 1 year or in 2 years, and you want to earn money. So vocational training is about that. And actually here in Russia we have a lot of programs for vocational training. We are in the process of modernizing this sector in the Russian Federation. We, as I said this morning, we are champions in world skills and in many other championships across the world. So we really can share this. Share our educational technologies in the area of vocational training. And there is a plan of Ministry of Education to make this bridges between the Russian vocational training facilities and vocational training facilities in other countries in order to move on into this area. Urban development, another area of potential cooperation. Again, Russian municipalities are poor, just like African municipalities. And we have the same problems. Of, I don't know, dirty streets, how to utilize rubbish, how to make sure that the sanitation system operates properly, how to make parks comfortable and nice, and so on. And the Russians here have a lot of expertise, again, how with a small amount of money you can do a lot. And Russian cities are ready to share. Within the so-called sister cities initiatives and all other sorts of cooperation, they're ready to share their technologies. Of course, Moscow is leading here. Again, if you talk to the Moscow government, they will say, we work in Algeria, we work, I don't know where, in Rwanda and in some other places. So we provide our intellectual solutions to these countries, and they do. They show how to make the system of intellectual operation of the public transport, for instance, or Yandex.Go is kind of also moving on to other parts of the world and becomes popular in Africa as well. All these taxi operating services, right? We have the best system of car sharing in Moscow, and again, we now teach other cities across the world how to do the car sharing and so on and so forth. So from this point of view, it's a very promising sector. Agriculture and food security. You all know that this is a very kind of sensitive issue to for the African continent. Russian agriculture has been developing in the last 10 years, well, with a sort of boost. I think that it is one of the leading sectors now in our economy. And actually, there was a time when we were claiming to become the great energy power, but I think that our future is a great food power, because we have enough fresh water, we have enough fertilizers, we have enough land to feed the world and to provide enough food in order to supply a large part of the world population and to resolve all the issues related to food security. So we have very well, again, developed agricultural sector. We have examples when Russian private companies open up the educational centers in African countries, for instance, to teach farmers how to use fertilizers, to teach farmers how to use new green technologies, etc., etc. So in this area as well, we might have very, very good results, and we see the first projects going on. And finally, the area which I think is very important is development of the civil society. Because again, Africa is the territory of NGOs, right? So the NGO sector is quite active in many African countries, in Russia as well. And I think here we have a good potential for sharing and experience in resolving the social problems of different vulnerable groups. What Russian NGOs are strong about is project thinking. And I see that in Africa, project thinking is still kind of, I can't say far away, but it still can be developed further. And from this point of view, again, we can share how to make projects, how to design these projects in the social sphere, and how to make sure that your NGO becomes effective. What impedes this progress? The problem number one that we have in our relationship is money, of course. Because Russia, says, yes, we want, but when it comes to money, it turns out that we don't have enough money to invest into Africa. Unlike China, unlike, the United States, unlike many other countries. So the Russians are not yet that open to invest money into the African continent. And businesses as well. So they see the opportunities. You know that Russian export to Africa is much, much larger than Russian import, but it's still peanuts. It's still peanuts compared to the amount of trade turnover that other countries have with the African continent. And moreover, this trade turnover of Russia is focused mainly on North Africa. So if you look at this customs statistics, you will see that most of the countries that we share trade with is countries like Egypt or Tunisia or Algeria or Morocco. So mostly our trade is there. So it's not in sub-Saharan Africa. And why Russian businesses do not go into this adventure, right? So we had a forum last year where we discussed the major problems, and most of them said, we see the risks, but we don't know how to reduce these risks. And the government, should take care of this, because in China, for instance, it's the government that tries to hedge these risks and actually to help the businesses, right? In Russia, no. In Russia, the Ministry of Finance says, no, we don't have spare budgetary resources to play into these games, right? And so the businesses, they do not enter into this adventure. Hopefully, next year, and there is again the decision of the Russian Prime Minister, there will be a special fund that will support the risks and will cover the risks and support the investments into the African continent. So this is one of the kind of echoes of the Russian-African summit last year. I think that, the decision is nearly there to create this kind of special fund, which is good. Another problem is logistics, because logistics really makes everything very expensive. So we don't have good transport routes, transport corridors to Africa in order to make sure that our trade is mutually beneficial. Again, Russian companies like Fesco, they are working on that, and they are trying to make now a kind of hop-on, hop-off route across the African coast, so that they can actually bring certain amount of Russian goods to different points on the African continent, collect it all, and bring it back to Russia through St. Petersburg. But again, logistics so far is one of the major obstacles. It makes every purchase in Africa very expensive. And another obstacle from the point of money is the lack of money in the African countries. So Africans aren't ready to pay. So when we speak about equal partnership, normally it looks like, okay, let's do equal partnership. So what's your contribution? Well, we are poor Africans. We don't have money for that. We're not going to pay for it. We can give you your deposits, our deposits, mineral resources. But if you sell soap or shampoo, you don't need mineral deposits. You need money for your shampoo. And this creates a problem, and the need to find the mechanisms for the mutual trade. It can be, trade houses like it used to be in the 17th, 18th, and 19th century. It can be some sort of, barter trade when you exchange certain goods. But we need to find the ways to overcome this obstacle of lacking money. At the same time, we see another example of, again, when you come to B2C sector, we see another example how Russians can be very kind of, well, make profitable business, like again with Yandex.Go. So it is oriented on kind of ordinary Africans who can pay $1, $2 for something, for some service, right? So, and that's why this business is working. So when it comes to large projects with B2B sector, etc., it doesn't work, unfortunately, so far. Hopefully, when this fund of the government appears, there will be more investments and more trade initiatives between Russia and Africa. Second thing which impedes our, hampers our cooperation is the lack of specialists. Okay, we're in GIMO, the university which is supposed to be the kind of, well, birthplace for specialists in African studies, right? So we have a number of other centers across the country, but if you count all the experts that we have in Africa, this will probably be about, I don't know, several hundreds of people in Russia. So, which is not enough at all. So we don't need have this we don't have these people who have knowledge, who know what's going on the African continent, and who can be real kind of advisors and consultants and help the businesses and the government to take proper decisions. And most of the people that out of these hundreds, a few hundreds, right? Most of these people are historians or political scientists, who are absolutely useless people, as you may understand, right? So people like me, political scientists who can talk about everything and knows nothing, right? So that's why, we really need to invest more here in Russia if we want to develop cooperation. Invest more in training, in education for the experts in African countries. And vice versa, the alumni of the Russian universities, or people like you who had a chance to visit Russia or to study in Russia, so you can be ambassadors. Ambassadors of kind of good relations with the Russian Federation, because you know the Russian culture, you know how the businesses work here, and at the same time you know how businesses work there. And so you can be this kind, you can somehow cover this shortage of experts through this mechanism. Another problem is the stereotypes. Again, Russia is supposed to be one of the non-racist countries, right? So, but this kind of, sentiments, xenophobic sentiments are still very typical of Russians. A few years ago, there was a sociological survey and, again, respondents were asked to about the attitude to people of different cultures, to foreigners, to people with different skin color, etc., etc. And I think it was like 58% of Russians who said, no, we won't be happy if our daughter is married with a person from Africa, for instance, right? So yes, they are kind of, not against, but they won't be happy because the stereotype is there. And actually, in order to, if we want to change something, we need an information campaign, awareness campaign here in Russia, saying that Africa is the continent of the future. We're still lacking that. But that's what we need. And finally is the issue of implementation. We make a lot of good declarations about Russian-African cooperation for, as I said, even in my memory, for over 26 years. So, yes, in 1998. In 1998, I joined the Institute for African Studies. And I was working in the sector of Russian-African cooperation as a junior researcher. And in 1998, everybody was saying, Russia, Africa, friendship forever, big potential, cooperation should be developed. 26 years after, do we see the result? Unfortunately, no. So we organize forums, we sign declarations and plan of action, etc., etc. Turkey also organized forums, but if you look at the results of the Turkey African summit, you will see what happened next. So today, Turkey is connected with direct flights with half of the African continent. The number of Turkish embassies in the African countries has grown twice or 3 times. The number of Turkish cultural institutions and various soft power instruments has grown. So if you say that you want to develop relations with Africa, do invest into this development. Do it. Don't only speak about it. So we had a huge impetus from the second Russian-African summit. There was a big hype in Russia, in all the structures, ministries, businesses. Everybody was talking about Africa. Now, after 1 year, again, what happened? Do we see a kind of real growth in contracts? No. Do we have direct flights of Aeroflot even to parts like, I don't know, Zanzibar, where the Russian tourists are ready to go and ready to pay for the tickets? No. Do we see any other kind of huge tectonic changes in our relations? No. We still continue to talk about the future, prosperous future and promising cooperation. So actually it's time to act. And I think the next point of action will be in 2026 because it will be the time for the third Russian-African summit. And as bureaucracy works in all countries, all bureaucrats will immediately say, oh yeah, we have to do something. We have the third summit. So we finally have to do something in order to put a good report to our superiors that something has changed since 2023. So the next stage of our kind of reinvigoration of Russian-African relations will be in late 2025, early 2026, taking into account the bureaucratic logic of making reports. But it's all in our hands to change the situation now and next year, and to do something that we can do to make our modest contribution to the development of Russian-African cooperation. And I hope that after visiting Moscow and after seeing how it all works here, you will be encouraged to continue your partnership with our country, and actually you will make, again, your small contribution to our joint progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dmitry. I suggest you stay on the podium unless you prefer to take questions from here. It's time to act. Maybe it's an actor talking into you, maybe more. I'm fully supportive. D'accord. Time to act. Now we have a generous time for questions. I know yesterday our African friends were not shy in raising hands and asking questions. I know our Russian colleagues were slightly more shy. So I hope now we can have an opportunity. We do have an opportunity to take questions from all interested parties. And although our speaker has your list with your pictures and has a phenomenal methodology on remembering all your names in 5 minutes. And your faces. Even with that, I would suggest that you introduce yourselves when you ask questions briefly. Thank you. Who comes first? First.
У нас микрофон есть даже, как у взрослых. Вау, хорошо.
Good afternoon, esteemed professors and colleagues. I'm happy to see everybody here again on our second day of the conference and forum organized. So yesterday we spoke about the collaboration within
Just
the universities.
Introduce yourself.
Yes,
It's
my
also
name
good
is
for the-
Daria
for the
Morozova Daria. I'm the student of this master program here in GIMO with Peer Center. And I want to ask you and talk about the role of education. I always advocate for the measures that need to be taken and implemented within the impact, the high impact of education. We all know that our children is our future. And here, I guess, there are some measures that absolutely need to be taken within the collaboration. And I guess the problems that we now have within these stereotypes that Russia is facing and African countries are facing is the lack of soft power. So I guess there are some measures need to be implemented within our secondary education and trying to raise the respect for African countries and not many people know about African countries. Where is this continent? How many countries are there? So we need to organize some maybe events within GIMO and schools here in Moscow and talk about Africa. So when we talk about countries, then our general level rises, and then these problems within the not enough respect will be overcome. And my question was within those obstacles that we now have within all spheres. So can we actually somehow change this situation, or is it only about the government-to-government cooperation, or right now, as students, we can do something and change, maybe not that much, but slightly raise awareness of people and somehow respect our African colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. I think wonderful idea, and definitely I believe in the role of civil society. I believe that actually people can do more than governments, and the governments are less flexible. The governments are more greedy and selfish in their approach. So people can do much more. What we see is again a kind of micro steps to change the situation. For instance, in some schools in Moscow now you can study, I think, Swahili and Amharic language, which is good. It's not a kind of widespread practice, but at least it started. We hope to have a Museum of Africa in Moscow, which will actually show to the Muscovites and to all those people who come to Moscow, and you have the huge turnover, millions of people going through our city, to show the kind of best possible options of African arts and African culture. We do have a number of kind of, again, civil society initiatives and projects, again, like this forum that is going on in GIMO about Russia, Africa, what is next, about the Russian movement of children diplomacy, because they also try to invest into teaching children more about African culture and languages, etc., etc. Again, but these are micro steps. Of course, if people are more involved into this, I think it would be much better. That's why I say that every one of us can make this kind of very small but very important contribution to this mutual understanding between Russia and Africa. We see the examples again of private schools, I think, in Egypt and in some other parts of the world where, again, Russians, they do come and open up a private school, and they try to promote, again, Russian culture and on the African continent. But if we want to change the public opinion, we need a huge awareness campaign. That's the responsibility of the government. The government is not yet ready to invest into this because the government has other options for spending. Therefore, I don't believe in radical change, but I believe that we should continue to do micro efforts and not stop here. So I think this is important.
Kirill Prokhorov, master student of international security. Thank you for your lecture. It was quite interesting. My question is related to we are living now in a digital era, and new technologies such as video conferences really help us to communicate remotely. And could it be, and if yes, how could it we benefit in terms of our Russian-African cooperation between maybe governments and, as you said, civil societies and so on, and other maybe forms of cooperation?
Well, I think that in most cases, the digital technology really help us, because it can increase the number of contacts, at least through online, through hybrid conferences and forums, etc., etc. But we don't know. That's why I said, one of the major problems is we lack expertise on Africa in Russia. A few years ago, I came to the director of the Institute of African Studies and said, can you make a research for us about the African social media? Because we don't know who is popular in your country as a blogger, for instance. We don't know what kind of topics are discussed in Facebook or Instagram in African countries. And they said, can we do this kind of research? I said, no. I said, why? Well, simply because we don't have people whom we can send over there to African countries or who can search the internet even here, and we need more money for that, some millions of rubles, etc. I said, okay, fine, let's live ignorant just as we have been living for years. So and this is that's the problem. We lack expertise, and it's not only about Africa. 2 weeks ago, I was in Kazan, in the capital of Tatarstan, and as you know, they will host the BRICS summit, and we had a conference there about BRICS countries and the potential from the point of our joint fundamental common values, etc., etc. And there was a guy there, I think very, very smart guy, who said, we're talking about BRICS, we're talking about Asia as a kind of vibrant region which will make the future of the world, just as Africa, etc., etc. How many people know what is going on in Indonesia, for instance, or what is going on in the Philippines? If you ask an ordinary Russian or even a Russian expert, but not on Indonesia, he will probably say, well, some Muslim country living on the islands, right? And just like with the Philippines, the same. They are producing some wooden furniture and things like that. And nobody knows that Indonesia will most probably in the next 15 years will become the 5th largest world economy, right? And the country which will already has the population which exceeds far the Russian population, and which will be one of the centers of human resources in the world. Or Philippines, which produce, I think, 50% of GDP through high-tech production, because most of the different manufacturers, they move their manufacturing facilities to the Philippines. And so on and so forth. And so the same with Africa. So we do need to invest more in training experts in African countries. And as I said, not only those who know very well the history of Africa, right? About history, again, a good sign is that in the Russian history textbooks, which are now being changed in the schools, and you know that we'll have some sort of modernization of our teaching of history in Russia. So they now try to focus more, not only on European history, but on the history of other regions, be it India, China, Africa, and so on. So we try to shift this colonial focus, which we used to have, Eurocentric focus, to demonstrate to our children in schools that the world is much larger and much more interesting than just Europe. And I think it's a very good and important shift, which will definitely bear its fruit in the next 10 years. And probably some people will know that Great African War, right, which happened in the late 90s and early 2000s, is no less important than the World War II or some kind of conflict which happened for 30 years, I don't know, on the European continent and so on. So it's important to disseminate knowledge, and that's what civil society and social media and new digital technologies can do.
Thank you. Now it's turn for the African colleagues to ask a question. I moderate here.
Excuse me.
Yeah, please.
Victor Korytsin. So
I'm sorry. I'm saying that it's now turn of for the African colleagues to ask a question.
I asked for a microphone.
Yes, and you were late to the class. Yes, please. Yes, go ahead. Mike, please. And please introduce yourself.
Thank you for this chance. My name is Alum Saged. I'm from Ethiopia. I have two questions. The first question is, as you have mentioned before, the Russian arms and weapons are they are very accessible and affordable. So what do you think about the distribution, or for whom the arms or the weapons are being sold to, and their effect on nation's sovereignty, and what are should there be whitelisted and blacklisted individuals or organizations that you think are terrorists and being involved in the sovereignty of the nations? My second question is regarding the cybersecurity. What are you as Russia? We know Russia is very good with the cybersecurity. So what are you doing to train and to collaborate with and to teach African nations in matter of helping us achieve national sovereignty? And if there are some programs you could recommend us being participated.
Okay, thank you. As for the weapons, I guess the Peer Center has very good weapons on experts on conventional, unconventional, yes, and weapons and experts, everything. They have everything. So on conventional weapons, and I believe that Russia at least has a very kind of strict system of export controls and tries to make sure that the official supplies of weapons, they go only within the legitimate channels. So and in accordance with most of the standards mentioned in the Treaty on Small Arms and Light Weapons. So from the Russian official side, definitely, all these weapons go in the right hands and within the official contracts. And again, the weapon smuggling from Russia, again, is persecuted severely. And I think in the last, let's say, at least 20 years, probably we did not see a kind of large cases when the Russian weapons were smuggled somewhere by private entrepreneurs to other countries. For the cybersecurity, there are certain initiatives. I think, again, a couple of months ago, I met a few people who were ready to organize special courses for the, from MISIS, I think, from the Moscow Institute of Steel. So it's one of the innovation universities called MISIS. So they are, I think, now developing the program for the African students to teach them cybersecurity and modern IT technologies. So they do it in collaboration with the large Russian companies. They had a direct, they were approached by a number of governments of the African countries. So they had visits of ministers and deputy ministers for digital development from these African countries, and they are now developing this program for specialists from Africa. Hopefully they will make it very quickly, and then they will be ready to offer it as an educational product for the African students.
Thank you. Dmitry, I have a question to you now. You mentioned it a little bit in your presentation, but I may probably want you to be a little bit more detailed here. The tourism, the future of tourism.
No, there will be no tourism. My approach, there will be no tourism.
There will be no tourism. Let's see. Then there will be no mutual understanding, because we're happy and blessed that there are such programs as New Generation and some others. But actually, I'm now talking on the both sides, but maybe a little bit more from the lens of the Russian people, when you say that, well, the knowledge of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa in particular, is quite low. Tourism may be different, and of course, some of our Russian counterparts pay tens of thousands of dollars to go and buy the hunting tickets in Okavango, in Botswana, or in Tanzania, you name it. But then you probably will not understand people as well. You just don't see them around that much when you go like that. Much more promising is something which brings you educational value together with just traveling and nature. I remember my son was 8 or 9 when I brought him to Tanzania. And in addition to the obvious Big Five, we went to an orphanage near Lake Victoria, where there were kids whose parents died mostly from AIDS. And my son was socializing with those kids. Yes, we brought some pencils, something useful to them, something very practical, not candies, not chewing gum. And he was playing football with them. Of course, been mostly impressed that the ball was made not like the ball. It was made just, from some used T-shirts and something like that. So this brings you better understanding. On the one hand, you can see Africa developing very quickly, very impressively, and your stereotype of Africa may be completely wrong. On the other hand, you still realize that it's not a developed part of the world, and that there is a lot of poverty and there are a lot of challenge in the healthcare and other things. How our people can better understand it without traveling that. It's a dilemma and certain paradox here, but how would you respond to that?
For tourism, you need direct flights. We do not have direct flights with the majority of African countries. I think now we have only to Egypt or something like that. So I mean, that's issue number one. So even Russians who have money, I mean, they have to pay more for the indirect flights, for the Ethiopian Airlines, to go to Addis Ababa and then move to other parts of the African continent. And with the current logistics, with all these flight limitations on the foreign companies to Russia and the ability of Russians to travel across the world, through Turkey, Serbia, looking for some kind of indirect and strange ways. So this is not at all helpful for the development of tourism. So in the next, let's say, 5 years or so, we won't see any boost in Russian tourism towards Africa, definitely. Even though, again, African countries are supposed to be in the list of friendly countries and not unfriendly countries. So therefore, somehow the government recommends the Russian tourists who go abroad to go to friendly countries, right? So on the one hand, there is a prospect, but on the other hand, it won't be realized because of the very expensive flights. The kind of option number two is when we say, oh, let's develop tourism. Africans go into Russia, the same. I mean, who in Africa has $3,000 to go to Russia for a visit? So maybe a few exceptional people who can offer afford this kind of expenses, plus pay for the Russian visa, which is what now $200 or something like that, right? So again, not very cheap one. Fortunately, again, what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing is trying to sign the no visa regimes with different countries, including countries of the African continent. What we are trying to do is to promote volunteer expeditions. We have a special project which is called Missia Dobro in Russian, the mission of kindness, when we encourage Russian volunteers to go to different countries of the world to help, right? But again, we subsidize their tickets and we help them on the spot, to find the accommodation, etc. So it's still the money that the government gives, right? So it's not just. But we see how, again, when we speak about civil society, how some sort of civil society initiatives also grow. Just recently, we had a group of Russian doctors who came up to us and said, like, we do have money and we can afford to buy the ticket. Show us where to go. We're ready to go to Zambia, to Cameroon, to some other parts of the African continent, and to work there in hospitals and to teach the doctors and to help, women to give birth to children and so on and so forth. And this is good. It means that, well, this interest is rising, but as I said, in the next, let's say, 5 or even 10 years, there will be no boost in Russian African tourism. It's just blah, blah. Show, maybe again, only Egypt, because, I mean, Egypt is known for the Russians and for the massive Russian tourists. And if, again, logistics become slightly easier and cheaper, there will be more and more people who like to go to the Red Sea, to the beaches. Right, but at the same time, again, we can again, African countries can also make their investment into this. Look at the example of Vietnam, for instance. Vietnam is the sort of mecca for international volunteers. So they earn money on volunteer tourism. They organize special tours, their travel agencies, for people across the world who would like to go to Vietnam and to help as volunteers in different social projects. So people pay for that. They buy this kind of tours and they go. Again, this is a potential area for business and an opportunity to somehow give some at least small impetus to the development of tourism. And I realize, I mean, that's why I'm saying that, well, all the stereotypes, they can be broken, as I said, only through the huge awareness campaign and through human-to-human contacts. So both were lacking so far. So what we can do is just to make at least small steps while our governments, be it Russia or be it governments of the African countries, are not doing anything into this direction.
Thank you, Dmitry. I got your point, but I think it's very important that you added here example of Mission Dobro and others. So while the traditional classical tourism maybe is not exactly what will be happening, I think it's, well, and it's actually straight to the point of what I was asking, learning with help, learning with trying to help to be integrated at least temporarily in the healthcare system for the doctors, into teaching activities. That's something which I think should be, Russian young people should be encouraged to do that, at least looking at on the Russian side. Now Victor's turn. Виктор Курицын.
Она там, наверное,
Thank you. I would like to ask a question about how can Russian structures, such as, for example, Russian diplomatic structures, or, for example, Rossotrudnichestvo, can promote Russia's position on the current political events in foreign countries, how they can spread Russia's point of view, promote a better understanding on Russia's foreign policy, on the various political issues that are important for Russia, such as the current political situation, the conflict with the Western countries, the situation in the Ukraine or in other aspects. So how can we make our voice heard in other areas of the world, especially in Africa? How can we show our position?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, we show our position through, again, joint declarations, like the declaration that was adopted at the Russian-African Summit. The ambassadors do kind of their routine work by giving, again, the kind of, well, making speeches and statements and various events in the African countries. We organize in the Russian houses abroad and in the embassies the movie shows. We show documentaries and fiction, normal movies, right, about what is going on and about kind of Russian political stance on this or that. On that issue, we organize exhibitions, there are different projects, etc. But I realize, I understand your concern, because we do it not with a strong voice. And to my mind, if you ask me not as a person who is a government official, but as an expert, to my mind, for that purpose, we should change the system of diplomatic education here in GIMO, and we should change the corporate culture in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Because currently, what people study here in GIMO, and I'm a product, as Volodya said, I'm a product. So I'm a product of this education. So what we studied history, we studied language, but we did not develop our communication skills. We did not have special programs in psychology, for instance, a kind of advanced course. So the university was producing people who can be good in analytics and in writing, but not in communicating with other people, which is the most important skill for a diplomat, right? So because you as a diplomat, actually the only job that you do is talking, and you should do it very well in order to convince other people and to make them your supporters. That's why the government pays you for. That's what the government should pay you for. But currently, the diplomats that we have and the graduates from the universities that we have, they are good in writing. So they can write a wonderful paper about the current state of Russian-Zimbabwean relations. So with conclusions, with data analysis, with historical facts, but that's it. So they won't be the ones like Americans who will sit on the jeep, take a jeep, take a box of humanitarian aid and go to a distant village with the American flag and make an event. So by just bringing there one or two boxes, Russia brings tons and does not speak about it. And the same with diplomatic corps. The people who work in the Russian embassies, they are mostly silent. They are silent, and they know how to read from the paper some kind of meaningless phrases about this or that issue. So, but they should be proactive, especially when you represent the country which is in the state of war. The country which fights with the global evil, which fights for the traditional values, which fights for the new world order. You have to be proactive in your communication. And that's what we are lacking. So that's the answer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dima. Okay.
There was one question, I think, over there, right? So
Okay.
they took the mic from you, right? Yeah.
Who's there? Yeah, sure.
In line with his question.
Okay. You have it, or it's already
we have
answered? Or?
Yeah, we have another candidate. Well, it's over there. One.
Thank
Okay,
you. Let
sure.
me use
Go ahead.
the chance. My name is Gashav. I'm from Ethiopia. I'm very much thankful for your critical view of Russia-Africa relations. I like that of our politicians who always makes a good speech, but you are critical of that relationship. But I want to raise some issues. You raised one issue with regarding to skill transfer. Everyone is talking about the skill transfer: China, America, the Japans, Russia, and everyone. But to what extent Russia is willing and committed to transfer a skill to its African counterpart, whether in the agricultural sector or the technology sector or the cyber security, as my colleagues raised on, or any other sectors, even if there is a practical examples, if you can give us. The other issue is that you raised the lack of implementation of a number of initiatives initiated in the Russia-Africa cooperations or summit. But to my understanding, as far as my knowledge is concerned, there is a historical legacy that was not yet transcended. Historically, Russia-Africa cooperation is largely focused on security rather than development sectors. Still, this legacy is also continued. Take, for instance, the current context of Russia cooperation with the Sahel regions, the Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, also Sudan. In the Sudan case, both the Russia and the Wagner are also participating. Even if you look from the African perspectives, the African leaders have more a tendency or inclination to cooperate on security field with Russia rather than on the development field. If you take, for instance, or take a comparative perspective, if we take China, initially, from the beginning, Chinese presence in Africa or relation with Africa is largely focused on development sector rather than the security sector. Nowadays, China is also shifting its position to have a cooperation on peace and security issues, as it is projecting power as on global terms, while Russia is projecting power on this issue, so political and security issues. So if you reflect on these historical legacies, you can take the Soviet Union, you can take also after the post-1991. The other question I want to raise is with regarding to the private security partnership. You make some claims that the Russian mercenaries will not harm Africa as compared with the Paris or the London and so. Mercenaries are mercenaries. There is no difference between them. And if you give, this is my question.
For the skills transfer, I think, yes, we're ready to do the skills transfer, and we see it. I mean, and Russian companies already have training programs for their employees on the African continent. For instance, in Guinea, you have the Russian aluminum company, which has training centers, and not only in the aluminum production, but also they've built a hospital, for instance, there, and the advanced medical center. So they bring Russian doctors who transfer the skills to their counterparts, and they move across the country. So they help, again, local hospitals as well. You have Rosatom and Rusal as well, which I just mentioned, who provide fellowships on their part. So they have a system of fellowships for the students from African countries in order to come and study, for instance, in Russia. A number of companies, they have within their corporate social responsibility, they have programs again for the transfer of skills. For example, Fosagra, in a number of African countries, they are the major producer of fertilizers in Russia. And actually, they have established the schools for farmers, as I said, in a number of countries. So where they transfer skills to the farmers on how to use the fertilizers and do it properly in the best possible way. The same with Rosbiotech and the Russian Agricultural Academy here. So they involve African scientists in joint projects on how to modernize the crops and how to make sure that the grain that you are using, for instance, and how to do it more efficiently, you know, from the point of food security. So again, there are a lot of micro examples. So it's not a kind of, if you look at it, there is no kind of strategic vision of how we export skills to the African continents. But at the same time, we see a lot of initiatives. It can be private initiatives, it can be public-private initiatives, but they do go on. And I think that, as I said, globally, I do hope that the Ministry of Education will start this project of transfer of skills between the Russian colleges and the African colleges. So they will select a kind of partner college in each country and will try to make this kind of bridge and connection with the Russian colleges. I agree entirely about your point that our cooperation with Africa is mostly focused on political and security issues. And this is history. Again, it's a kind of, partly biased view on our history, because the Soviet Union invested a lot in the development of infrastructure as well. And in building hydropower stations, in building plants and factories, in building hospitals and schools, etc., etc. Of course, I mean, all this infrastructure is in many countries, because of the tropical climate, it's in the past. But we did have projects of economic cooperation, and they were aimed at promoting development of African countries. Right now, Russia lacks money. And that's the only explanation, you know. So if we were like China, China has a wonderful, first of all, they have a huge amount of money. On the other hand, they have a wonderful strategy of helping others. If you look at the Chinese strategy, you know, right, that China is now the largest owner of loans for developing countries, more than the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, etc. So the countries in the world owe to China more than to the international financial institutions. So what China is doing, and they are very smart guys, you know, Chinese are very pragmatic. So they give you money, and then for this money, they bring you Chinese construction workers, they bring you Chinese trucks, they bring you Chinese banks, they bring you Chinese restaurants, etc., etc. So all this money go back to China. And you owe them money, have to give it back. And at the same time, so they own on that, you know. So, and this is a wonderful, I think, scheme. So Russia is very, from this point of view, a country of charity, you know. So we're very kind people. So and this is our bad side of our personality, you know. So we always try to help others, just because we are so kind of generous, right? So Chinese are much more pragmatic. So I hope that one day we will also start to change the rhetoric. But here it comes to political difficulties, because as soon as we start changing the rhetoric and saying, okay, let's make mutual cooperation, so we see the negative reaction on the African side. So, I mean, I attended a number of forums like this, and every time when I was saying, okay, as I said, Africans, let's do it equally, the answer was, no, thank you. I mean, we need your help. So we would like to talk about equality, but we're not ready to make our contribution to this equality. So the Chinese were smart, and they found the formula. They found the right language to convey this and to make sure that the countries that take Chinese loans or Chinese investments into building airports or roads, etc., so they do it kind of, well, openly, with a kind of happy mood, etc., etc. We are still on this road to find the right words to convince African countries to make equal cooperation between the two parties.
Thank you. Yeah, you want 2 fingers? You want to clarify? Go ahead, and it will be the final question. Yeah, please.
I just want to ask and to add some little things about what the colleague raised, because each line is of the same question that I had, which the colleague answered and you answer, which colleague asked you and you answer partly. I believe that when you see around, I worked different African countries. Currently now I came from Uganda, representing this program to Uganda, but I came from Somalia original. That's where I am born. I saw when I was young, my country had some kind of wars and different things. There are a lot of buildings that we had in Mogadishu, Somalia, which I remember some of them had Russian names. The defense headquarters in Mogadishu was constructed by the Soviet Union. There is a road in Mogadishu called the Via Moscow Road. Now, recently, I think some few months back, the name was changed. There is also the office of the Prime Minister was also constructed by the Soviet. There were a lot of infrastructures I saw home that were constructed by the Soviet. And that's now where his question was. That gap now seems to be, I don't know, it's not so much as it was. If you see more of the collaboration today, Russian government is in the field of energy, security, and more of interrelational with the government. What he meant was the perspective of the development, the social development, the one that engages with the civilians is left out. It's there, but it is too minimum. Now, you see some countries like Uganda, where I come from, Russia has no culture house. In Somalia, there is no Russian embassy. The nearest Russian embassy is Djibouti. So if you want a visa, you have to travel to Djibouti. You can see when you see most of African people, and you try to see their opinion about Russia, is completely different. Most of them, when you see that Russia distanced itself, previous devil things the Western countries committed. Some had vast grievances that were so severe. The colonization, the neo-colonization that came after colonization. That's why recently you've seen French countries getting away from the old colony. And it is the same. When you see the perspective of African people, mostly of them, they believe that Russia is a country that has been mutual. But now my point is, the government seems to be trying to cooperate in Africa more of the field of security, energy, intergovernmental. And that's what the colleague was raising. Why is it not going further to collaborate the African people in infrastructure projects, in developments? As you said that some of our leaders are problem. You are right there. I know some of them. But there is a way the Chinese have been doing, and US have also been doing. The point where you said that US came and delivered 2 things somewhere, there was an organization where I worked and I saw the same thing. The ambassador was here for something that was a bit, I can say, very, very amazing to me, that high-profile person came just for something that maybe someone could not even come for it. But as you said earlier, they are good for speaking, and they are good when it comes to media. And that's what our people have also been doing. If you see most of African people, if they try to insist some of the Western countries, they are either being, prevented from traveling there, or maybe their accounts or maybe different things is frozen. The Chinese has also had the similar programs where it comes to you and they offer you something. There is a way the African things are done. So I believe what stopped Russian government from doing this kind of thing?
Very, very, very good question. We had a debate. I think in summer, yes, a couple of months ago, there was in St. Petersburg, there was a large international judicial or law forum, right? And we had a panel. I was moderating a panel there, and there was Maria Zakharova, who is our major spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we had discussion because we were talking about just what you are talking about the role of NGO. And I was like, okay, Americans are investing in NGOs. French are investing in NGOs. Chinese are investing in NGOs. Why Russia doesn't do so? I mean, it's a huge lever which we can use in order to change the attitude, in order to even somehow sometimes push the governments in these countries to be more friendly to us, etc., etc. And what she said, like, no, we're not like all these Americans. We're not going to undermine the political systems in other countries. So we're not going to invest into the NGOs because this can be a kind of subversive activity, regarded as subversive activity. And I said, like, okay, it's stupid. But that's the kind of official discourse that we have, that that's kind of inappropriate for the noble Russians to do this kind of dirty things like investing in NGOs in other countries. So hopefully, again, this situation will change because, I mean, the Russian NGO sector is developing because the world is going on, because, I mean, the world of the future will be the world of communities and of the civil society, not always the world of the governments and of the states. And finally, all the people who are in power will realize that this kind of instruments should be used actively in order to promote the cooperation, human-to-human, people-to-people cooperation, and to invest more into the development. A good thing that we do in Rossotrudnichestvo is the system of so-called partner Russian houses. So we started it a couple of years ago, and the idea is that we do not always have funds and intergovernmental agreements in order to open the official Russian house with all this diplomatic immunity, diplomatic passports, anthem, flag, etc., etc. So what we do is we sign a cooperation agreement with people on the spot. It can be, I don't know, Association of the Russian Alumni, for instance, or it can be some kind of local NGO or somebody else. So who are ready to promote Russian language, Russian education, Russian culture, and we open up the partner Russian house. So it's not an official, the one with the flag and with the diplomatic immunity, but it does nearly the same job. Well, as much as it can afford. We provide in-kind donations to this, so we help them to bring people to Russia. We can provide some sort of, I don't know, school equipment like tables and virtual tablets and things like, or books, etc., etc. So they find a local sponsor, or sometimes it can be a Russian businessman who is interested in developing relations with the country. He invests into the operations of this partner Russian house. And we already have about 15 points on the map where there is no official Russian house, but where you have this partner Russian house. And most of these locations, they are based in Africa, in Sudan, in Mali, in Central African Republic, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, and in some, well, I hopefully we'll have more, because we have more applications. We have application from the alumni of the Soviet universities from Madagascar. I think we have some people from Nigeria who would like to open up the Russian house, this kind of partner Russian house there, etc. So at the same time, we continue to do it officially. For instance, last year we ratified finally, after 5 years of negotiations, the agreement with Angola, and I hope that in next year or in 2026 there will be official Russian house in Angola. So a kind of return after years of lack of any influence, and after years of good relations between the Soviet Union and Angola, we will finally have a Russian house in Angola officially. So, but this official part, is the government is less flexible, so it goes slowly. But with the partner Russian houses, we can do more, and I hope that in the next couple of years, there will be like 25, 30 countries on the African continent, which will be covered at least with this kind of activities. And Uganda, I mean, as you mentioned that I was there last year, and for me, again, talking about perceptions and awareness campaigns. So our guide, he's a young man, I think he's like 25 or 27, something like that. And he, of course, knows practically nothing about Russia. He is from the young generation, so he never had Russian tourists before, etc. So for him, Russia is a kind of terra incognita. And I asked him a question, but at least maybe you heard something about Russia. What do you know about Russia? And I thought that he would say like Putin, like everybody says. Like when you ask a person abroad, what do you know about Russia? People say Putin, right? So, okay, so I thought, okay, he would probably say Putin. But what he said was very amazing and surprised me very much. He said, well, I know a guy who cooks meat. And I was like, whom? And he said, well, there is a strange guy who always cooks like an ostrich or a buffalo or something like that. So, I know that in YouTube, yes, there are some kind of, these short video clips of a guy. He comes from the Caucasus, I think some from Dagestan or from Chechnya or from North Ossetia. And he's really good. He always has these big knives. And he always cooks, like he takes a huge ostrich, entire ostrich, and starts, just roasting it or something like that, So people watch it. And that's the importance of digital technologies. So for this guy who knows nothing about Russia, in Uganda, Russia is the guy who cooks meat. So, and maybe it's not good, it's not really bad, so at least he knows something, and for him it's a pleasant emotions that he get from the Russian side. So we need to do more to promote this awareness, and as I said from the very beginning, I hope that after your visit, when you return to your countries, you will be able to become some sort of, again, our ambassadors to your countries, telling people truth about Russia, about Moscow, about how life is organized here, and hopefully this will promote Russian-African cooperation.
Thank you, Dmitry. I think that's really part of your very important question is that there should be not only Russian investment in human development in Africa, but even more human-to-human contacts. That's what we were talking before. You're from Somalia. I must say that my very best personal assistant was Somali, Miriam, and that was the greatest experience. How bright, efficient Somali people are. I learned from her, and later on we wrote an article together, a joint article, because she was not only eager to learn, she was already a well-established young researcher. So this is how I think is important to see each other, not preaching, sometimes teaching, but normally working together. And I'm very grateful for Dmitry that he shared with us his experiences, his thoughts. I know he is the person who does not believe in triumphs of bureaucracy. He that kind of person who believes in triumphs of human-to-human contacts. And for that, I'm very grateful, Dima, for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
I'm also grateful for you and Rossotrudnichestvo that you participate, partner, and lead this very important program. I just as part of advertising, do you have your book with your? Not yet. Dmitry is another author of this yearbook, which we already presented to you yesterday in soft copy. The best participants here will get this copy, hard copy. Do you pay for the luggage? So I mean, that's not that heavy, but it's kind of heavy. Can they bring one copy back? For not all of them, but some of them, and those who want, of course. For others, there is a digital link, including Dmitry's chapter here on Russia's soft power. So this is yours, and there are some things which you may or may not have. This is in Russian already. I know there is at least one person here in the audience from Ethiopia who reads and speaks Russian. So please contact me in the break. I also will share with you material in Russian. But so far I give it to Dmitry. Do you have this copy? On the technological renaissance in sub-Saharan Africa, challenges and opportunities in African-Russian relations. And this is what you contributed for quite a number of years, Dmitry. This is, I know you don't have. This is an anthology of peer center publications.
So this was a very productive visit. You see how people earn in this country. So you come with a lecture, you get a lot of presents, and you can go back home. Yeah, that's great.
We have 10-minute break. We started slightly late, which I was not happy about, but this is fact of life. And we will reconvene at 4 o'clock sharp with my lecture. Thank you.